I didn't intend to be a photographer. My father paid for a very expensive private education in England, which came useful because after being in English public school, staying 4 months in Afghanistan is really not a problem. And I went to Oxford, and I was going to become a banker, and then I traveled, and I didn't feel like that was really what I wanted to do. I wanted to go back out and see the world. And I applied for a course at London College of Printing, which is now called the London College of Communications. It's part of the Chelsea College of Arts and Marist College of Fashion colleges in London. And when I think back to those times, this is 1990, 1991, it seems to me that it was an era of news which seemed very noble or more dignified. It was the time of the fall of the wall. It was time when you opened up Newsweek and Time magazine, and there seemed to be extraordinary stories happening across the world that were really very important to us all. Things always seem much more positive, so I think this is maybe, the golden glow looking back. And I felt like I want to be there. And on that course, there were 24 of us, and I think we were mostly dreamers. We didn't really know what we were doing. And I think we didn't understand also the dangers we were going to face, because two of those people died afterwards. Paul Jenks died in Croatia in 1992. And James Miller was shot in Gaza in 2003. And I myself didn't really, I think, understand exactly what I was getting into. I thought I was doing something very different to my father. And this is the reason why I have this picture here, because my father was in the military. And this picture is the British cavalry retired officers gathering for their parade in Hyde Park, which they do every year. And my father had been wounded very badly. He was in the parachute regiment in 52, but he got called up to Suez in 56. And he was told to report to Goose Street Tube Station wearing a bowler hat, a black suit, and carrying a long umbrella. And this is the picture which reminds me of him. And I thought it'd be very different, but as I found out, I also ended up going to war. I went to live in Kiev in 1991, what is still the Soviet Union. And I went to my first war in January '92. I met a guy who was a journalist for something called the European, which is a paper that doesn't exist anymore. And he said, I want you to come with me to Nagorno-Karabakh. Okay, that is, anyone here know what Nagorno-Karabakh is? It's a small region in the mountains between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And it's basically inside, physically, Azerbaijan. Anyway, the Armenians in those areas were fighting over this bitterly. And he said, I want you to come along with me. And I said, okay, let's go. And I was completely unprepared for the emotional trauma that I was about to experience. We went there to Yerevan, the capital. We took a helicopter. And we joined up with some very irregular troops. I somehow expected these to be really sort of hardened troops, and they were just regular guys, just anyone like you or me. And the second day, they started mortaring. We walked down to the trenches, and they started mortaring the next door village. And they did this for like half an hour. And then suddenly, a heavy machine gun starts firing back at us. And we're lying down in the ground for 3 hours, and I'm sitting there watching these bullets flying over my head. My nose is like right in the ground. And I'm thinking, like, if I stand up, I'm going to be dead. And that's one of the extraordinary things about going to these places. You can't, it's like sort of being in the middle of a video game or something. You can't really sometimes separate the difference between the surreal and the real. And a few days later after that, we went to the capital, a place called Stepanakert. And these areas were in the hills, raining artillery on it. And I remember we literally would hug the buildings. We walked down the street, and I'd be completely transfixed by the sound of shrapnel flying through the streets. It's like a sort of kind of strange kind of contemporary music, this sort of whistling of the shards of metal flying past you. And I ended up going to the hospital and running in, and in this operation room there was a guy on a table, a very Spartan table, and suddenly a shell lands right on top of the building. And everybody runs to the side of the room. Then another shell lands, and the ceiling starts falling in, and the walls are shaking like jelly. And I think that's it, we're gone. And then it stopped shelling, and I run out, and this is when I find this guy who's just a wounded person. And then I followed him into the hospital, and I just stopped, and I came out, and it's like this feeling of sort of drowning, of like sort of gasping for oxygen. Is this, you're seeing what you're seeing, but somehow you refuse to believe the reality of what you're watching. You're just not prepared for it. And then, and also at the time, I thought I was taking amazing pictures. I was there seeing something I'd never seen before. And this was the time we were taking film. This is slides. You can digital, and just look on the back of your camera and see what you have. And in fact, when I got back and the film was processed, it was nothing like what I thought I had. And this was the best picture from that. And we went back to, anyway, I thought that was, I'd see nothing more shocking, but I was wrong. I went back to the first soldiers. They were preparing for a night parade, for a night patrol. And the next morning I came up, got up very early, and I found them, and they had a prisoner. And then they took that prisoner. They hadn't been expecting me to see me, and they only came back with his head. And then they put that head in a muslin bag and stuck it in the back of our car. They drove us to get the helicopter back out of there. And I can still hear that head rolling around the back of that trunk on a bad day. Anyway. Now, you would have thought that would have stopped me getting back to this, but no. Once you get a taste of this, that's the problem. It starts to work in you. You start to get fascinated by this journey to the edge. You get fascinated by what's over on the other side of this dark edge. And I went to Georgia in the Caucasus, and has anyone here been to Georgia? No? Okay. They're kind of crazy guys. They make great wine, great foods, fun guys. Anyway, like all these places, after the end of the Soviet Union, they all started breaking up, huge ethnic tensions, and there was a civil war going on in the part of this country. And I was with a journalist, and we were staying in a hotel, and 4 soldiers walk in, and they start drinking. And they see me and this blonde English girl, and they say, come on, that's great. And then they say to us, well, why don't you come with us back to the front? So we say, okay. And it's better really a little wine by this point. And so we wait for them, and they come back an hour later. And then they say, in fact, we're not going to go to the front, we're going to have a picnic instead. Because that commander stuck into BC. We said, okay. So we went out there, and then, in fact, we started driving not towards the mountains where they said we were going to go, but to the capital, and I thought they were going to turn us in. And no, they just wanted to pick up 2 girls who squeezed into our Jeep, and we drove off. And then we got to this place by the river, and they started making a fire to grill the meat, and had more wine, and they turned on the radio, and then the girls disappeared, officers first, into the bushes. And at one point, at the end of this day, I remember following this soldier, and he was going to clean his rifle. And then suddenly he just picks up this bayonet and he just lunges right at me. And I remember just like reeling back like this and taking this one frame, and I didn't know whether to laugh or to cry, because this guy's, thrusting this thing at me, and then suddenly he bursts out into laughter, and of course it was a joke. But when I look at this picture, in fact I feel very sad, because all these young men suddenly felt very patriotic, these new countries that had once just been part of the Soviet Union suddenly becoming these new countries, and they wanted to go and fight for it. And then this war is still going on 20 years later, and probably this man is dead and most of his friends. Back in Kiev, so of course I had to work to make a living, which was a bit of a problem. But one of the things that fascinated, I think John Morris said, photo editors was anything to do with the Soviet military. And so one day I got a call from the Minister of the Interior in Kiev, and they said, we have a new special ops group, we want to show them off. Will you come along? I said, okay. So we go along, and then of course the first thing they start doing, they start, breaking the bottles on their heads, and then they start chopping up the bricks. And then this guy takes off his top, and he lies down, and he takes a piece of wood and he puts it over his torso, and then this guy drops a knife right into the, and you hear that twang as that dagger reverberates in the wood, and you're thinking, no, he's not going to take away the wood, is he? And then he takes it away, and that's what happens. And then what I like about this picture is that if you look on the very far left, there's this leaf slowly falling down exactly at the same time. And of course it just bounced right off his stomach. And how I did that, I don't know, but it's just a miracle. Now we're back in Georgia. There was another civil war in the west in a place called Abkhazia. And I went there with 2 other photographers and someone from the press service of the president. And we got there in a helicopter, and we were supposed to go there for the afternoon to photograph these guys who were fleeing from the coast towards inland. And there was a huge crowd, there were thousands of refugees fleeing away. And we got dropped off by the helicopter, and the pilot took fright, because there was literally crowds trying to get onto the helicopter, and he flew off. Now this wasn't in the plan, because I didn't have a sleeping bag, and the only way back into Georgia was across a 3,000-meter mountain, along with the refugees. And this was already in October, so it's cold. So we start walking up, and at the beginning it's okay, because you're going through the forest, it's not so cold. And then we spend the first night, and I'm doing spoons with the guy from the press service. And the two other photographers, because they're experienced, they've also got sleeping bags, and so they're okay. And so we were all night long, we're like doing spoons and we're jumping up and down. And then the next morning we start walking up onto the open mountain. It's getting steeper and steeper. And as it gets steeper and steeper, you start to see the bodies. So first it's every 100 meters, then it's every 50 meters, and it's every 30 meters. Because it's just that steep, and no one's got any food. And at one point we suddenly come across this old man, and he's sitting on a big, literally a jam jar like that, 5-liter jam jar. And he looks at us. He looks at me, I don't know why he looks at me, he looks at me, and he asks us to save him. And one of the most interesting aspects of being a photographer is this idea that somehow we're the messenger, we're just the observer, we're just looking, we're not participating. In other words, all this is happening in front of us, but somehow we're not really connected to it, because we're just on the outside, we're just taking the photograph, we're just taking these pictures okay, for ourselves, but also to show to all of you. And then somebody asks you to save their life. So what do? You walk on by. And you know, we couldn't even see the top of the mountain. His family was too tired to carry him, obviously. But at the same time, there were 4 young men, and we said, no, just walk on by. And that man still wakes me up at 3 in the morning, every now and again. I think about him, because even though I know we couldn't have saved him, the fact that someone asks you to save their life, you just walk right on by. It's very hard to bear. And so we kept going up, and then finally we get over, and this picture is just taken on the other side of the mountains, when we're coming back into the woods, and you see these people, and look how exhausted, and they've got 2 things. They've got their clothes and their lives, and that's all they have. Now we're going to Azerbaijan, to Baku. So at this point in the early 1990s, there was just wars all across the Caucasus, and you know, for these people who lived in really tranquility, it was a terrible shock to society. And one of the things the hardest thing I've always found to photograph is photographing a mother burying a child. And this is a mother whose son had been killed. And I'm waiting by the grave, and I remember seeing the funeral procession coming up the hill, and suddenly, what she's seen the hole that's waiting for her son. And that's when she opens up her arms and throws it out wide to ask, like, God, why her son had to be the one that died. And one of the issues as a photographer you have here is that, of course, you know, how close is it that you should be here? Because you're intruding on a very, very sensitive moment, a moment of probably the most painful moment in this person's life, and you're right there putting a camera in her face. And on one hand, you feel a certain acceptance, because it was just a lowly soldier, it wasn't a general, there was no one else there to photograph this funeral service. And so you feel like, you know, they're okay because you're there to record this moment. But at the same time, it's every single photographer has to make this moral and ethical balance about where you're going to stand in the picture. How close or far should I be from here? What is the wrong place? How close is too close? Because Kappa said if he wasn't good enough, you weren't close enough. But at the same time, every time you're there, you have to make this judgment, which is often very difficult. Now we're in let's change of pace now. The Hermitage. Who has been to the Hermitage? Okay, right. So this is actually, they've now moved this to across the square to the new General Staff Inn. It's on the top floor where the Impressionists are. And one of the great joys of being a photographer is like suddenly coming across a moment that you didn't expect. Now, surely there were people, of course, in the top floor watching, looking at the Impressionists. But suddenly you have here, you've just got 2 sets of legs. Now, do you ever remember the grannies who like sit in those chairs? Like, have you ever seen anybody more terrifying in their entire life? Okay. And then you can't really see, but the first one, she's wearing Cuban heels, right? Now, you're actually allowed to take pictures in the Hermitage. You can buy a ticket and you can pay. But at the same time, it's like when you get a little bit too close to the picture, the paintings, you sort of feel bad about doing it. And at the time, I got a Leica, which is very quiet. So just this tiny little click, you know, like this. And yet, I'm taking this picture, and you just know she's got this frown on her face when you do that. And so, like, you're thinking, like, yeah. And then, because you take the next step, and then the parquet creaks, you know. Now, okay, so when you come to Russia, who here's been to Moscow? Okay, a lot of you. And in the winter. Oh, come on, guys, really. Okay, so the Russians like their luxurious bathing, as you can tell. These people are called walruses. Mosh in Russian is the word for it. And they're actually, quite often, the most traditional time is on the 19th on Epiphany. They go and do this. But also people do it year-round during the winter. And she's a member of something called the Moscow Walrus Club. And they go, it's in the Silver Woods in Moscow, on the outskirts of the city. And they go every Saturday and they crack the ice until it's gleaming. And it's very interesting because you've got some guys just like leap right in, go right out. And then you've got some that are going to go forever and ever. And then this woman, and this is what to me is like really the quintessential thing about these Russians, is like you can see, she just did breaststroke, very elegantly. And she's going so smoothly, you can see the snow has set her on her hair. And then she gets out, and it's like she's stepping out of, you know, some pool in Monaco, right? Okay, now I remember very little about this picture, except that it was Easter morning in a church in a region north of Moscow. And when I look at this picture, because one thing is always when you shoot film, so you have contact sheets, so you can see, you can follow your progress by what you were doing. So I can see from my contact sheets that I was photographing the midnight mass, and then I knew I had dinner with the priest because I was a guest of them, but I got nothing of that dinner. I just got the next morning, and so what I had the next morning, I got this guy, this young man asleep on the bench, and you know, to those of us like me who lived in Russia a long time, I look at this and it's like being the detective. You have all the trappings of the country meal. You've got the samovar, the vodka, the bread, the buckwheat, tins of peas, and you've got the sleeping guy. And it's a mystery. That's Russia. And obviously, after all these wars, I was having the need to become something more spiritual. I had a very good Russian friend, a guy called Vladimir Syomin, who's the only Russian I think who won the Eugene Smith Award, which is a very important award in America. And he would tell me that I was a terrible photographer. Not because my photographs were terrible, but because I took them for money. And he said, you can't be a real photographer if someone's paying you to take pictures. So a real photographer only does it for the art. You have to suffer for this, okay, James? And he says, you need to come with me on a pilgrimage. Now, what he didn't tell me, this is a 4-day pilgrimage that went for like 120 miles. And you literally do not sleep. And you go with these men and women, it's like 2,000 to 3,000. And you follow them on this course, wandering through this place called the Kirov region. It's like 800 miles from Moscow. And it's a procession returning a famous icon to the place that it was found in 1383. And this picture was taken on the very last morning. I'd already been walking, and you know, I don't like to complain, I'm an Englishman, but you know, you've got terrible blisters. You know, I remember the day before I'd seen a babushka, and she had like a, you know, and I was complaining, and I see this babushka going past me like this, and she's got a big bag, and she's wearing slippers, you know, so I'll stop pitching. And I remember the next morning, and it's about 5 in the morning, and that first 10 minutes of, you know, every day when you wake up, you know, it's not like you're drunk, but everything's not entirely sort of clear or in focus. And I was sleeping in the open under a poncho, so I looked at my poncho and I go like, Jesus, an angel. You know? and then suddenly I hear the prayers coming. She's wearing this very light plastic coat. And I took one picture, or maybe a couple of pictures, and then suddenly she got up to join the rest of the pilgrimage. Talking about religion, this is the old circus in Moscow. During the Soviet times, the Russians destroyed a lot of churches and they built a lot of circuses. And to me, it's a little bit a question of belief, because obviously when you go to the circus, you know a lot of these things aren't really, you know, to be believed. And so I look at this picture, it's actually a trampoline artist from Georgia. It's got a very hairy chest, but you can't see it because it's black and white. They're wearing peach chiffon shorts. You can slightly see the chiffon thing there with by his knees. And so they didn't quite go with the hairy chest. But anyway, when I look at this picture, it reminds me of, you know, why does one goes to the circus, but the joys about going to. Also, there's a photographer, because it's a bit of a trick here, because you can't see the trampoline, right? So it's like this guy flying. You can't say, what's this guy doing? You can't tell. But he's actually a trampoline artist. So I went to live in Italy in 1998. Just at the times, I think, felt I was needed to have a break. So they said, you can go and live in Italy. And I got sent to go and do a story about the Matanza, which is this famous tuna harvest. If anybody's seen Salgado's book, Workers, he also went there. And basically they catch bluefin tuna, and which weigh between 80 and 300 kilos. Now the thing is, you should never work with kids and large fish. And so we went on a Friday for the Saturday fishing. We go out there, we like frying on the sea in the Mediterranean. This is like early June, and it's like Sicily, and it's bake. We were just cooking out there. And they can't get the nets up, too strong, the current, the wind, I don't know, they can't do it. Sunday you don't fish in Sicily, of course. Monday you go out at 6 in the morning, and the guy called the Reis, who's the chef, he looks at And I'm staying, there's no hotels here, so I'm staying with a couple, Giovanni and Giovanna. And he's an old fisherman, and he's got a voice like this. And so I come back on the Monday, and he asks me, "L'hanno fatto o no?" And I say, "No." "Domani, sono sicuro." So like, tomorrow I'm sure. So I go back Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday they finally do it. And then they get this, and then the amazing thing is they get these fish and they take it, and there's a team of Japanese guys right there on the coast to cut it all up and fly to Tokyo overnight. So during the Kosovo War, I went to Kosovo, but I also got stuck on a US cruise missile ship for a week. Now I like Kentucky Fried Chicken, so I mean I like Southern Fried Chicken, so I was okay because that's all I ever got to eat in this thing. But what I found very disconcerting about this was that this was not what I understand war to be. War is something where you can see the enemy, where you can see people, you can see the fear, you understand what something is about. This is about pushing a button and watching a missile fly off in the middle of the night. And I found it completely disconcerting. To me that wasn't war. And so I wandered around the ship every day trying to find something to latch onto. And I walked past a room and they were taking pictures for the ship's log. And I saw this guy, I don't know why, but somehow he made me, seemed like from another era of like World War II, I don't know, he's like, somehow that this guy seemed the only thing that was real to me on that entire ship. And that's why I took his picture. Okay, so when you're in Italy, you do a lot of very simple assignments. There's a famous journalist now there called Johnny Apple, who was a legendary journalist for the New York Times, and he did this famous political writing, he did lots of food stories. And when Johnny did a food story, it meant 3 pages in the New York Times. So you've got to get a lot of good pictures. And so these are tomatoes in a place called San Marzano, which is near Salerno. They're the most famous tomatoes for making the sugo that you use to make tomato sauce with. So I went down, and I was met by 2 guys from the Comune, and they take me to the last field of tomatoes left in San Marzano after the harvest. And there's literally nothing in there. It's like there's a farmer, and he's got his hands like this with like a bunch of tomatoes. And he'd say, "Great, there's your picture." So I do that picture, and they say, "Okay, great, let's have some lunch." That's what we do in Italy, let's have some lunch. So we had some lunch, and that was very nice. And then they gave me 25 kilos of tomatoes, which was also very nice. And they said, I said, "Is there anything else?" And they said, "Well, look, we can't take you to the factory where we tin them." And I go, "Okay." So the guy who runs the factory comes to pick me up, and we drive off, and we come to this sort of white-looking shed. And then we walk in, and then it's like Fellini who got there before me, because it's like I got these the perfect Italian mama, and not just one of them, but like a whole gang of them sitting in the tomatoes, and I think like, thank you, I like it. Okay, now when I was living in Italy, so I met my wife was still living, well, she was my wife, she's my girlfriend. Who was in Moscow, so I was volunteering to go to Chechnya all the time, which made the New York Times very happy. And this is the second war, when they were retaking Grozny. Now, to give you an idea how much ammunition was used to retake Grozny, more ammunition, bombs fell on Grozny in that conflict than any other conflict since World War II. Wow. It was literally flattened. It's a city of 1 million people. There was literally no one had done it. And this woman was carried out 10 days in a wheelbarrow by her son. She'd been wounded by folded masonry. And I've been taken there on a guided tour by the military, where you're not supposed to see anything, of course, that looks like is not on message. And this woman suddenly came up, they hadn't been expecting her. And I remember, and suddenly she parked her right in front of me, and she's looking at me, and I took 1 picture, 2 pictures, and I couldn't take anymore. She's just looking at me like this, she's not saying a word. And I remember I just started talking to her, saying things like, "Don't worry, you'll be fine, everything's going to be okay," which of course I didn't believe, but I felt like I had to say this to her. And she didn't say a single word. I just sat there staring at me, sometimes just completely stopped me in my tracks. And then of course, the guides came, "Okay, we've seen enough here, we need to leave now." And we had to get out. I went to Baghdad several times before the war. So this is Saddam's Baghdad. And what frustrated me in Baghdad is that everywhere you had to go, you guided. You had someone from the Ministry of Information taking you around. And every time you want to take a picture, you got to literally put up your hand and say, "Can I take this picture?" And you say yes or no. And what amazed me about Baghdad is, everywhere you go, you see Saddam. Saddam, he's in a painting, he's on a mural, he's in a mosaic, he's Saddam the Sheikh, Saddam the the general Saddam, the peasant Saddam. I used to have one with this really weird Swiss hat, which I wrote in caption. I don't know what that was. Anyway, and so everywhere you want to see Saddam, and you see him, you don't know the real one. And then the very last day, we're in a place called Saddam City, which is now Sadr City, which is the Shiite area in the north of Baghdad. And they took us to the wedding parlor. And this is like total contradiction. So in other words, finally I get to see someone, and I ask if I take a picture. And of course I can take a picture, but of course I can't see their face. And this is the conundrum. So all this time I wanted to see Saddam, couldn't see him, and I could actually see someone, and I couldn't see their face. 2001, I went to Afghanistan for 4 months to cover the attack on the Taliban. Now, Afghanistan is surely the most scary place I've ever been to. You drive down a road, and every day you went down that road, you had no idea if you're going to get to the end of it. Because it's just guys with guns, and you have no idea who they are. Absolutely none. Of course, you're not armed. You've got a driver, a generator, a fixer, a translator, and that's it. You're completely defenseless. And I went to Afghanistan thinking somehow these Mujahideen guys, the Northern Alliance, he was extraordinarily brave, wonderful man, I'd be really inspired by being with these fighters, and they were complete cowards. The moment started someone firing, whew, they were 50 yards back. And I somehow found this very depressing. But that's the wonderful thing. You suddenly, your day or your month or your year can suddenly be lifted up by one moment. And I was driving back from the front where I'd seen this guy been firing some shells, and suddenly I see this couple. And this is in a place called Badakhshan, which is in the northeast of the country, and it's been after 3 years of drought, which is why it's so barren. And I guess it's just a husband with his wife. And I remember taking this picture and then putting down my cameras and just listening to the sound of those donkey hooves going tick, clop, like that. And it's this moment of just somehow extraordinary tranquility and perfection that you sort of feel like, you don't want to take the picture because you feel like if I take the picture, somehow it's going to break this moment. And that was the extraordinary conundrum about Afghanistan. It's like on one hand, there's monumental brutality and violence and coldness, and at the same time, this extraordinary warmth of a couple walking down the road. And this is the violence. So this, basically, about where the end of this library is, the shell fell there. So we're driving to the front, first day of the war, the day that the Americans start bombing. And a stray shell lands in the middle of the road and kills these two guys. And you can see these people rushing over. And what's amazed me here is that they come over and they have a look. But there's no sense of compassion about, like, what can we do for these guys? It's like, okay, this is written. This is the wrong day for these people. And I remember somehow feeling this was, even though we get so hardened when you're in these places, you start, by osmosis, you start to get hardened by the environment where you are, by the people you're with. But even so, it still doesn't remove the shock of watching something as painful as this. And somehow I expected these guys to, I'd want to help or to somehow do something, and they just stood there. And then we had to go further on, right onto the front line, and I came back 2 hours later, and they'd been taken away and buried, and all that was left was a small patch of blood in the sand. But at the same time, it's just this moment where, like, you had this, you're looking, and I remember photographing them, and you're photographing a man that is dying. And you know he's going to die, there's nothing you can do to help him. Except you're looking through this camera, and in a way it's like a filter, because somehow you look through the camera and you can feel, this isn't really real, it's not really happening, I'm not really seeing this. And then of course these are the moments that sit you, when you're putting out the sieve, when you're going through your memory, going through your past, these are the moments that somehow you realise never quite leave. They're always there, sticking in your mind. This is in Mazar-e-Sharif, and the mosque behind is the Hazrat Ali Mosque. Ali, is one of the Shia leaders, he's buried in Najaf in Iraq, but his spirit is supposedly buried in Mazar-e-Sharif. And when the doves come back, it's probably a sign that peace is coming back. And there's also legends about them. If a grey pigeon turns up within 40 days, he turns into a white dove and so forth. And of course, all this baloney, which of course you don't believe, but that's about Afghanistan. Sometimes you just want to believe. When also in a place like this, you're also latching onto something that makes you want to believe again in the quality of humanity, that in the goodness of the people around you. They're not just like murderous barbarians. And also the guys who are bombing from above as well. And then so I look at this picture, and then I don't think, in fact, I could have positioned the doves any better if I could have given 10,000. And so somehow it makes me happy to believe. This is the American, John Walker Lind, who was found in Mazali Sharif, from a series of pictures. He was in a bunch of Taliban prisoners during a riot in the. You can see there were basically 800 of them, of whom not many of them survived when the full-grown battle. This tank's just rolling over backwards and forwards over these dead Taliban guys. And one of the things about Afghanistan, this was the first digital war. I literally went there on a plane with a camera, at a D1H, it was, a Nikon, and I'm reading the instruction books on the plane. And of course, the thing I wasn't ready for was like how much space this takes up in your computer. So I had one computer and one hard drive, extra hard drive. And then after a while, I'd been in there 3 months, I started running out of space. And so every day I have to cut, And I started cutting that day, and then I said, no, I'll do this tomorrow. I'll do this the next day. And the next day is when I found out that the guy I photographed was an American. And those were the pictures I wanted to cut, and then most of it found out that it wasn't. This is in Lebanon, on the south of the country, at the Fatima Gate, which is basically the border point with Israel. These guys, as you can imagine, are from Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah is a very interesting bunch of guys. I mean, and I think I'm the last photographer who photographed Nasrullah in his home, and I was there waiting for 3 weeks to see him. And what's strange to them is they extraordinarily charm me. They would send me poetry on my birthday by email. And one day the guy calls up and he says, the press guy says, because it's a very important demonstration, you have to be there, James. I know you're here in Lebanon, in Beirut, you've got to get down there. This is really going to be big, big news. Okay. So I get down there very early, and there's nobody. There's a cafe, so I sit down and have a cup of tea, and then suddenly buses turn up, screeching to halt. And a bunch of women get out, and some guys who hand them these enormous portraits of these Shiite leaders, and they tell them to go and stand over there. And as you can see, you look at these women here, they're chatting, they're screaming with laughter and everything. And you want to talk about the Middle East, and these women, it's just basically these people also living another kind of life. And suddenly they get given the charge, the call to march. And so they start marching, and they come to the checkpoint where the Israelis are, and they turn the portraits like this if they're going to threaten an invasion of portraits. And then they start throwing some stones and doing the keening with their voices like this. And then they come back, pile the paintings in the back of the van, and go off again. And that was it. You're left with one of the rare commodities in the Middle East, which is silence. 2003. And in 2003, there was an invasion of Iraq. Now, this is before the invasion. I'm in another plane, as you can probably guess. This is an F-16. And now, this is part of what's called Operation Northern Watch. In the old, left over from the first war in Iraq against Saddam, they were patrolling the north of Iraq. So I went up, and this is taken right over the border between Iraq and Turkey. And of course, it's amazing to see these fighter planes, F-15s, F-16s, but after like 3-4 hours of like refueling a fighter plane, you're like, come on, it's like, when are we going down? And then suddenly this one guy just like slams on the gas and goes, whoa, right past us. And I don't know, it's me even now, I don't know if I'm really angry or it interests me that the guy's like turning his head just like this. Where? He's looking like this. Hey, And I took a walk up, it really, really pisses me off, or I just think it's like, what a cool guy. So I invaded Iraq with the US Marines, which was an interesting experience. I wasn't actually, during the war, the people called it embedded and unembedded. I wasn't officially embedded with a unit, but I crossed the border with a guy called Dexter Filkins, who's a journalist now for The New Yorker. We hired a car from Hertz. We didn't tell them where we were going. We just said the desert, okay? And we crossed the border the first day of the war, and then we ran out of food, ran out of water, and then we bumped into the US Marines. And we said, we're here for Time magazine and the New York Times, can we come along? And he said, sure. About a week into the invasion, there was a ferocious sandstorm. And some of the troops were inside and some of them outside. And here we have, it was a complete dislocation. So you have these ferocious Marines in the middle of the desert fighting nobody. Because in fact, the real war comes after, right? This time there really was nobody. And yet, they're in this depths of this ferocious sandstorm, as if we're all going to be swallowed up in it. And what makes me laugh is that he's hanging on, he's hit the bonnet Skittles, okay? And he's hanging on to this packet of Skittles. Like, this is the last. He's like the guy on the cliff, and that civilization up there that he's hanging on to, that's his packet of Skittles. they're interesting guys, these Marines. And what amazed me with them is like even the most mundane functions somehow were imbued with this extraordinary sense of violence. So this guy is shaving, and surely he can feel when he's running the blade over his head that he cuts it. But no, he doesn't flinch at all. And he waits till the end, he gets the towel and he just stamps it right off. Because he didn't feel a thing. Okay? And that's the thing, you know, when the Marines never say fire, okay, so there's a guy there, and they don't say like, you know, shoot at him if he moves, you say, light him up. Okay? These are guys you don't want to fuck with, right? But they're very polite, they always call you sir, and they're very nice, they're very charming. Anyway, so this is just on the outskirts of Baghdad, it's 2 days before it falls. And this is what I wake up one morning. We try with Dexter to go, we'll wipe the very forward units of the Marines in the middle of the night, and then the colonel says, like, get the fuck out of here. So we go back and we pitch our tent, and I wake up in the morning, and this is what I see. And you can see there's a Cobra helicopter in the attack, and there's a dead body, and these guys surrendering this missile. And because one of the things during the war was, everyone was asking, does this guy have chemical weapons or not? And we were wearing, during our 3-week advance to Baghdad, we were wearing these awful chemical camouflage. It was basically like being in foil in an oven, in short. That every day, you know, it's something you're really worried, and then about 10 days into the advance, we have a gas alarm. So the siren goes, and everybody's like, it's only going to end, go put your mask on. Now, for the mask to work, you need to shave every day. Because if you don't shave every day, then it doesn't seal properly. I shave today because you lovely guys, I don't want to look shaven. But you know, you shave every day. But shaving like dry on cold water in the desert is not much fun. So I didn't shave that day. And at this point, I have a pregnant wife, anyway. And I'm lying, we're in it, and I'm thinking, oh my god, I'm going to die. I've got a syringe in right here in my thigh. I've just got to plunge into my leg if we really is an attack. And we're sitting in this tent, there's about 10 of us, and we've all got these respirators on. And it's like being in a Darth Vader convention. And no one's saying a word, right? Because like, I'm thinking, like, I'm going to die, you know, if this thing's for real. And then they all click us, and oh, God. And then we have 2 more during the night, you know. Anyway, it wasn't that, thank God. But, you know, at the time, we really didn't know. And remember, on that way, there were 17 journalists, Western journalists, who were killed in those 3 weeks. You know, often it was killed by friendly fire or by accidents. You know, some were killed by Iraqis, but, you know, just didn't know. And this is the famous statue in Ferdous Square. Now, the reason why this is the statue, we know, because CNN is about 50 meters to the left here, on the Sheraton Hotel terrace. Okay. At this point, there are probably 150 Iraqis, no 100, 200 Marines, and about 300 journalists. Okay, and something isn't quite right in the story, which is why I'm sort of going back. I couldn't tell you why, even then I can't say why I kept stepping back, somehow it wasn't quite right. And so I'm not even sure what this picture means, but it just means that somehow there's something wrong with this scene. I wouldn't want to kind of buy into this propaganda moment. But I couldn't even tell you what it was, but something at the time told me this was not entirely for real. Now, I'm just going to show you 5 pictures here. I'm going to go back very briefly to that first picture. I'm not just very long here though. That's a dead boy. In 2004, in the south of Russia, there was a school attacked by Chechen terrorists in a place called Beslan, that I knew you've heard about. There was it was a storm by special forces, and 330 people died, most of whom were kids. Now, I was in France when it happened. I wasn't there the day, I was flying the day the storm happened, and I arrived that night afterwards. And the next day, you know, like journalists do, you have this awful business to go around things like the morgue. And there's some pictures which you really wish you'd never had to take. And that's the one which, to this day, is one picture, it's the only one that I really wish I hadn't taken. I was already a father at that point, and you walk into this morgue and it's completely covered with dead bodies. There were so many dead, they had to leave them out in the open, and during the night there'd been light rain, and so there's these speckles on the plastic. And then one of his teeth is missing. And then, so you have this look at him, and then here you're not looking at it as a photographer, you're looking as a father, you're thinking, how did he lose that tooth? And then you realize he's dead. And yet I still take the picture, of course, because That's my job. Sometimes goes, just why am I doing this job? And in fact, after Best Man, I really had a very hard time with the idea of going back to photograph war, because you start to feel like the voyeur. I mean, there's always this accusation to war photographers that you're the voyeur. You know, there's a certain pleasure in this. That is, you know, it's your problem. You say you're there to do this to show people what it's like, to show people who, like you and me, who are wise enough not to go there. Sometimes it's a hard argument to be convincing about. And what's interesting, I went back 2 weeks later, and this is a series that won the World Press Photo. And it's interesting how people react to grief. This is, in this room, all the male relatives have been taken by the terrorists and executed and thrown out the window. And all the local men came round and they lit a cigarette and they left it to burn on this chair as a mark of respect. And sort of like installation art. It's interesting how sometimes when you look at these pictures, you've got to work much more than, because it's not so obvious what they are. And in fact, that's why this series became, you know, not remarkable, but people took notice of it because you had to work much harder looking at these pictures. I was still accredited to the Vatican, and you know, every year you wondered when John Paul would leave us. And I was there in 2005, along with 2,500 other journalists. And this is the day when they took his body from inside the Vatican, they walk it through the square, and they take it into the main part of the Basilica to lie in state. And I'm standing right in front of the Basilica, and I'm watching them bringing the body. And I'm imagining the photograph I'm going to take when they bring it right past me, because it's basically coming through the crowd like this. Everyone's, you know, taking pictures with their mobile phones. And he's been carried by the gentleman in waiting in the Vatican. And then he comes right past me, and maybe just because the body's so close to me, it somehow feels like, I don't know, it loses the dignity. And I didn't want to take that picture. I don't know why. I mean, I'm waiting for this picture. This is a historical moment right here, and I can't do it. And then I see them. There's a very steep hill right in front of the Basilica, and I see them taking you up. And I'm thinking, oh shit, I missed that. I really blew that one. And suddenly, they turn him around to show him one more time to the crowd. And this is just the moment where they turn him, and he's exactly parallel to the front of the Basilica. Now, I'm not a Catholic. I'm not sure I'm much of a believer, but sometimes you really want to believe. And you know, John Paul was a guy who made you somehow believe in stuff, and you know, a man who surprised the crowd. And I remember thinking, thank you, John Paul, for doing that. It was very kind of you. And this is a series about Chernobyl. I lived in Kiev for 4 years, and I went there in '91, so only 5 years after the Chernobyl nuclear accident. And I went to the zone, as it's called, which is the 30-kilometer area around the plant, which has basically been abandoned. And you see it's like a sort of fairy tale, but a very macabre one. And I photographed the men who were called the liquidators, who were both the ones who went to go and clear up the mess. And what interested me about this story was, this was people who were fighting an invisible war. And Russia is a country where the Soviet Union country was obsessed by heroes. And how can you make a man or a woman who's fighting an invisible war to be a real hero? And this is the series I went to. This is a helicopter pilot who'd been dumping sand over the burning reactor. And all these people were very, very radiated. And this is actually the grave 20 years on to the day of a fireman who'd been irradiated to death fighting the fire. And you can see the family, they're gathering here with the vodka and the sandwiches to mark his passing 20 years on. And there's almost no one else there, because, you know, this is how people measure heroes. It's an interesting reflection on our society, you know. If you can't understand the battle, then you can't understand the hero either. Talking about heroes, this man is called Victor Bout. Who here knows who Victor Bout is? Okay. Has anyone seen a movie with Nicolas Cage in called The Lord of War? Okay. This is the guy who it's based on. He's now in jail. He was caught in a sting operation by the FBI in Thailand. He's now in jail in America. So he's the most notorious arms dealer in the world. He never had his photograph taken. This was shot for the New York Times Magazine. And, you know, he's kind of a tough guy. And I tried to take a photograph once outside, didn't work. And I said, look, this isn't working. He said, okay, we can do it again, it has to be inside. So he turns up with his brother, who's his bodyguard, in an electric blue BMW, and they get out, and his brother's got a sky this wide. And I sit him down in the studio, and I just shoot with one light, not a flash, because I don't want to disturb him. You know. And I like this picture because he's looking at you, and you're not really quite sure what that's saying. You know, is that threatening? They're not threatening. And then I shoot him with the flash. Doesn't like that. He says, "Okay, that's over. This is a wrap." So, and then just as he's leaving, he turns around to me and he says to me, "You know, if I don't like your pictures, the best thing that's going to happen to you is I'm only going to break your cameras. And then he went. Okay, I'm not as rigid as Cartier-Bresson on this, but I really try not to crop it. I very rarely crop. It's not because I don't think it's like wrong or anything, but I think that, you know, there's a reason for a frame, and you should be trying to get that into the frame. And if you've got the wrong frame, then you've got the wrong lens on. You know, that's my, I mean, that's not necessarily the right answer, but that's what I mean. It's already, you know, photography is an entirely personal question. Like, every one of you had a camera, and they said, and you were given an assignment to photograph me here tonight, which would be a very dull assignment. But everyone would have a different picture. And if someone said, which was the truest picture? How could you say that? It's all relative. Everything's relative. You know, what usually happens is, like tonight, I was sitting there thinking, and my mind went completely blank when I thought what I'm going to tell you, you know? And so like you get there, and it's true, sometimes that story with the Pope, I saw that picture right there, and then suddenly there wasn't a picture. So in fact, you know, and also I think that you have to be flexible in this. You have to sort of let this talk. I mean, in other words, you should not be trying to impose your frame on it. You should be letting somehow be guided. And that's easier being said than done. But you have to, again, it's a question of proximity. You have to let these moments, these events somehow shape how you see it. Because, you know, there's 10 of you in the same spot. Which one of you's got the right, you know, the best picture? Which one is the truest picture? All this is very, very relative. And so your voice really has to be very distinctive. So I can see what you mean. Sometimes you might want to try and be visible, but in fact, at the same time, you have to really let the moment guide you. I'd like to tell you that every day I'm out there with my camera and like I'm, you know, praising the Lord that I can get out there, but I'd be lying to you if I told you that. I do get lazy and I beat myself up about it. Because in fact, that's absolutely the wrong thing to do. I mean, it's a waste not to get out there every day and capture the world around you. That's why I find actually iPhones or, you know, mobile phones are fantastic, because it's like, what's the pain? It's like, you know, carrying a huge camera around. You want to have a little thing, right there, you see something, it's right there. But no, I'm lazy when I come home, and I feel ashamed of that. But I try not to be. But you know, we all have our faults, you know, so nobody's perfect. Okay. So thank you very, very much.